Undercover boss orders coffee and toast, freezes when he hears the manager steals all the tips. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The ones who do the work don't get the tips. The one who gets them is the manager's nephew. She said it like it was normal. No one asked. No one checked. But that morning, inside Sunrise Diner number 28, a man in a worn cap and a plain black t-shirt sat quietly at the corner booth. To everyone else, he was just another traveler grabbing breakfast. But behind the ordinary clothes was Jackson Reeves, 52, founder and CEO of Sunrise Restaurant Group, a chain with more than 100 locations across the Midwest. Disguised as a stranger, he had come not for coffee, not for toast, but for the truth. The diner looked like any other roadside stop. A neon sign still flickered above the entrance with a soft hum. The laminated menus hung crooked on the wall, faded by years of grease and sunlight. The air smelled of bacon grease and weak drip coffee. A few customers sat scattered, a couple by the window sharing eggs and grits, a man in a button-down skimming the newspaper, two women whispering across their booth. Nothing about this place screamed scandal, but the truth often hides where no one bothers to look. Cassie, the waitress, approached with a tray balanced easily on her palm. She wasn't flashy. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose knot. Her uniform yellowed slightly at the seams, apron clean but frayed. She placed a steaming cup of black coffee and a plate with 2 slices of toast in front of Jackson. Not a sound as the porcelain touched the table. "Black coffee and toast," she said softly. Then, almost as an afterthought, "I added butter and jam, just in case." Jackson nodded, eyes steady. "Appreciate it," he murmured. Then, in the kind of casual tone any customer might use to fill silence, he added, "Busy morning, huh? Guess the tips aren't bad at this hour." Her pause was less than a second, but he caught it. Her hands didn't falter, but her eyes did. She smiled politely, though it never reached her face. And then, in a voice just beneath the hum of the espresso machine, she whispered, "Morning shifts are the worst for tips, especially when we split them. Only a few actually get anything." "Oh." She said it like it didn't matter, like it was a fact too ordinary to question. But for Jackson, it landed like a crack across glass. He lifted the coffee to his lips, but the warmth had already drained away. The bitterness he tasted now wasn't from the drink. It came from her words. He watched Cassie move on to table 6, pouring refills with quiet grace, sliding fresh silverware into place with practiced precision. She worked like someone who had long accepted the silence of unfairness, yet her every movement was deliberate, precise, almost defiant. She didn't ask for sympathy. She simply kept moving. Behind the counter, Jackson noticed 2 other employees. Tyler, a young man with slicked-back hair and a crisp uniform, leaned against the POS terminal. Beside him, Chase, a little older, hovered without a tray. Neither of them touched a coffee pot. Neither carried plates. They only stepped forward when a payment was due. Every card swipe, every digital tip, went through their hand. Jackson's jaw tightened. On the surface, this diner looked fine. Profits were steady. Targets met. But here, in the hum of fluorescent lights and the clatter of forks on porcelain, something didn't add up. The ones who carried the weight weren't the ones being rewarded. And the system he had built meant to be transparent, meant to be fair, was being twisted right under his nose. Some truths never show up in spreadsheets or quarterly reports. They hide in plain sight, settling quietly at the bottom of a chipped ceramic cup, waiting for someone to notice. This morning, at Sunrise Diner number 28, Jackson Reeves had noticed, and the silent investigation had just begun. Jackson remained in the booth longer than he needed to. The toast sat untouched beside the coffee, cooling slowly under the diner's humming lights. He hadn't come for breakfast. He had come to see what numbers never told him, to watch a culture play out when no one knew who was watching. Through the glass, the drizzle outside streaked faint lines across the window, blurring the strip mall beyond. Inside, he could see everything he needed. Cassie moved table to table, apron tied tight around her waist, sleeves rolled back past her wrists. She wasn't rushing, but every step had intent. When a regular signaled for more toast, she pivoted quickly, sliding fresh plates onto the table without noise. When a trainee fumbled a tray of mugs, Cassie reached in without hesitation, steadying it before a drop spilled. Her smile was brief, quiet reassurance before she turned again. She wasn't just working. She was holding this place together. Jackson's eyes shifted toward the counter. Tyler still lingered by the POS terminal, tapping the screen like it belonged to him. Chase stood nearby, arms folded, as if guarding it. Neither touched a coffee pot, neither cleared plates. They hovered at the one machine that funneled every tip in the building. Jackson's pulse slowed, not from calm, but from focus. He remembered an old line he had once told his managers. If you want to know if a restaurant is healthy, don't ask the GM. Watch how the staff pours coffee at 7 a.m. This morning, the coffee was poured endlessly by one person, Cassie, while two others lounged near the machine that captured credit card tips. It wasn't incompetence. It was structure. It was design. When Cassie returned to collect his empty plate, Jackson kept his voice level. "Why don't you run payments yourself?" She didn't look up. Her hand slipped the plate onto her tray, her voice barely more than a breath. "I don't have access. The POS only lets certain roles close checks. If your role isn't assigned, you don't get the digital tips either. I'm listed under supplemental staff. That's the invisible list." Jackson studied her face. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the counter, where Brad Coleman, the branch manager, leaned casually against the register, laughing with a regular. His crisp blue button-down, polished shoes, and silver pen clipped to his pocket made him look like the picture of competence. He had the posture of a man in control. Cassie's voice dropped even lower. "Brad sets up the rolls. Tyler's his nephew. Always gets the morning shifts. Always has full access." Jackson didn't reply. But his silence wasn't weakness. It was data collecting, a ledger forming in his mind. The system was supposed to guarantee fairness, role-based access tied to actual function. What he was seeing wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. Then Cassie did something unexpected. She slid her hand into her apron and pulled out a small notebook. Its edges were frayed, the cover bent from use. She placed it on the table in front of him with quiet finality. "I didn't want to complain," she said. "I just needed to know I wasn't crazy, so I started writing it down." Jackson opened it slowly. Each page was filled with neat handwriting dates, table numbers, bill totals, the digital tips displayed on the POS, and the much smaller amounts she actually received. Red circles marked the discrepancies. Notes lined the margins. At the bottom of one page, in a rushed hand, she had written, "Lost $46 today. No explanation." Her voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. "I've lost more than $600 this month. But what hurts more is no one ever asked who divides it or how." Jackson closed the notebook gently, like it was something fragile. He didn't need to read every line. It matched exactly with what he had already seen. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. In this silence, the weight grew heavier. A restaurant can survive bad reviews. It can even bounce back from thin margins. But when your best people begin to believe the system doesn't see them anymore, that's when it collapses from the inside out. Cassie picked up his cup, now cold, and refilled it without asking. "Careful," she whispered as she leaned closer. "Don't let Tyler see you looking at that." Jackson offered a faint nod. He slid the notebook back toward her, then reached into his pocket, scribbling something quickly on a folded sticky note. He tucked it inside the cover before she could object. His words were short, block letters. "Keep documenting. Don't give this to anyone. Wait for me to return." She froze, then glanced at him. He gave nothing away, just a neutral face, a stranger with a cap pulled low. She tucked the notebook back into her apron and moved on. At the counter, Brad disappeared into the back office. Tyler leaned into the pose again, tapping through screens with a familiarity that didn't belong to a part-time server. For a brief second, Jackson caught the reflection on the screen. User role settings, advanced access. Username, Tyler C. Jackson's grip on his cup tightened, though his expression didn't change. This wasn't just unfair. It was fraud wrapped neatly in routine. And now, finally, he had seen the crack wide open. Outside, the drizzle had stopped. But inside, a storm had already begun. Jackson left Sunrise Diner number 28 that afternoon without looking back. To anyone watching, he was just another weary traveler finishing a quick meal. But in his chest, something heavy had shifted. The notebook Cassie carried, the hesitation in her eyes. Tyler's easy control of the POS terminal, it all lined up too neatly. And when things line up that neatly, they rarely do so by accident. He slid into the driver's seat of his silver-gray pickup truck and closed the door. The cabin went silent except for the faint rattle of rain on the roof. He hadn't touched the toast in the paper bag on the passenger seat. His hands rested on the steering wheel longer than necessary, jaw set, thoughts narrowing into a single point. Then, finally, he picked up his phone. The call lasted 93 seconds. "Mara," he said, voice low but steady. "We have a problem." On the other end, Mara Lynn didn't ask for details. She had been head of internal investigations for 7 years, and Jackson trusted her with what no quarterly report could ever reveal. He gave her only what she needed. "The POS system is being manipulated. I need you to go in quiet, line by line. Every role assignment, every tip account. Don't alert the branch." Her reply was calm, clipped, and certain. "Understood." O'Day. Within the hour, the POS terminal at Diner 28 had been switched into silent audit mode, a hidden configuration buried deep in the system's code. The staff wouldn't notice a thing. Orders would flow, payments would process, tips would appear. But in the background, every role change, every override, every transfer would now be logged and sent back to headquarters in real time. The restaurant functioned like any other Tuesday, but it was no longer invisible. The first findings landed the next morning. Finding number 1, a hidden access tier labeled Preferred Internal, not visible to staff screens, not standard in corporate configuration. It had been applied to 3 accounts: Brad Coleman, branch manager, Tyler C., part-time server, and a third account, Kitchen Support 03. Finding number 2, over the last 30 days, total digital tips across the branch exceeded $4,800. Of that amount, 67% had been routed through Tyler C., even though his table volume accounted for less than 15% of service. Finding number 3, the payroll listed a part-time kitchen employee named Marcus Hill, clocked in for 21 of the last 25 morning shifts. But Marcus Hill didn't exist in the HR system. His ID file had no tax documents, no onboarding paperwork, and the social security number tied to his account was flagged for duplication at another branch, an old case Jackson remembered from 2 years ago. Back then, the evidence had been thin, the case was dropped, but the manager involved had been the same, Brad Coleman. Finance uncovered the last piece. Douglas Henderson LLC, a shell entity registered in another state, had been receiving weekly service processing fees every Friday, amounts that matched the missing tip totals dollar for dollar. On paper, it looked like legitimate payments for staffing logistics, but the contact email traced back to Brad's old account. The puzzle was no longer fragments. It was whole. Jackson sat in his office late into the night, the quiet hum of the city beyond his window. The evidence filled his screen, each data point another nail. Cassie's notebook hadn't just been accurate, it had been the starting thread of something much larger. Brad hadn't simply stolen tips. He had engineered a system, complete with ghost employees and shell companies, to funnel money upward while hiding it beneath layers of role access and service fees. But what weighed on Jackson most wasn't the fraud itself. It was the silence. Cassie had felt invisible, powerless, her voice muted until she turned it into pen and paper. The others, they had stayed quiet, maybe out of fear, maybe out of resignation. Either way, a system that punished honesty and rewarded silence was one that rotted from the inside out. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the glow of his monitor. This couldn't be handled with a memo. It couldn't be fixed with a quiet firing. Leadership meant stepping into the room and showing what integrity looked like. And that meant going back not as Walt Simmons, not as a traveler with a cap pulled low, but as himself, Jackson Reeves, CEO and founder of Sunrise Restaurant Group. And when he returned to Diner 28, there would be no disguises, no quiet observations. The truth would be laid on the counter for everyone to see. The storm he had felt in his chest was no longer waiting. It was moving. And by the time it reached that small diner on the edge of town, Brad Coleman's carefully built facade would not survive it. The rain had cleared by the time Jackson Reeves pulled into the lot of Sunrise Diner number 28 again. The neon sign buzzed faintly overhead, casting its amber glow across the wet pavement. To every customer stepping inside, it was just another morning in a small-town diner. But for Jackson, this was no ordinary return. The first time, he had walked in disguised, invisible. This time, he came back as himself. He pushed open the glass door. The bell above jingled like before, but the air shifted differently. Conversations dipped for a second. Eyes flicked his way, then returned to their plates. Cassie was moving between tables again, her apron tied neatly, hair pinned back, sleeves rolled high. She paused when she saw him. For a moment her steps faltered, as if she wasn't sure if this was the same man she had whispered her secret to. Jackson gave a single nod, steady, quiet reassurance. She exhaled and moved on. At the counter, Tyler leaned against the POS terminal like he owned it. His slicked hair was perfectly in place, his posture casual, almost smug. Beside him, Chase scrolled through his phone, offering half-hearted greetings to customers. Brad Coleman, crisp shirt pressed, was already in conversation with a couple near the register, laughing a little too loud. His confidence filled the space, practiced and polished, like he believed he couldn't be touched. Jackson walked straight to the counter. He didn't ask for a seat, he didn't ask for coffee. He set a slim black folder on the counter with quiet precision. The sound of paper against Formica wasn't loud, but it cut through the low hum of the diner like a blade. Brad turned, smile still on his lips, until he saw the man standing in front of him. "Morning," Jackson said evenly. "Brad Coleman?" Brad blinked, caught between politeness and irritation. "Yes. Can I help you?" Jackson didn't answer with words. He opened the folder, sliding several sheets across the counter. Audit reports, transaction logs, screenshots from the POS system, role assignments that showed Tyler C. with access levels reserved for managers, payroll entries listing a ghost employee, bank transfers to Douglas Henderson LLC. Each page was undeniable. For a moment, Brad didn't speak. His eyes darted across the papers, then flicked up to Jackson's face. He was about to dismiss him when Jackson reached into his jacket pocket and placed a business card on top of the documents. The silver letters caught the diner's dim light. Jackson Reeves, founder, CEO, Sunrise Restaurant Group. Silence spread like a wave through the room. Chase looked up from his phone, expression stiffening. Tyler shifted uneasily, his weight no longer as confident against the counter. Cassie froze mid-step, tray in hand, eyes wide. Even a couple of customers set down their forks, realizing something unusual was unfolding. Brad swallowed hard. This isn't what it looks like." Jackson's voice stayed calm, each word deliberate. "It looks like stolen wages. It looks like a system you designed to funnel money into your nephew's pocket and into a shell company you registered. It looks like the reason good people like Cassie lose hundreds of dollars a month while you laugh by the counter." Cassie's lips parted, the tray trembling slightly in her hand. For weeks, she had been invisible. Now her notebook, her quiet records, stood as proof in front of everyone. Brad reached for denial, but his words faltered. You don't understand. This was just a configuration error. It's complicated." Jackson's jaw tightened, but his voice never rose. "No, Brad. What's complicated is when employees stop believing the system is fair, when they think no one cares enough to look. That's what kills a company, not margins, not reviews, but silence." Tyler tried to interject. "Uncle Brad, maybe we should—" But Jackson's gaze cut to him, steady and unflinching. "You've taken 67% of the digital tips this month, Tyler. You didn't earn them, you didn't serve the tables, you didn't pour the coffee, but you were given the keys to the system. That ends today." The room felt heavier now, like the air itself was holding its breath. Customers stared, some whispering quietly, others simply watching. Cassie set her tray down, her hands trembling, but her eyes shining with something new recognition. Brad tried to recover, voice shaky. We can work this out quietly, Mr. Reeves." Jackson leaned forward, his voice low but unmistakable. "You had the chance to handle things quietly. Every time Cassie wrote in that notebook, every time someone here pretended not to notice, you were given that chance. You chose silence. I don't lead in silence." He closed the folder, slid it back into his jacket, and straightened. "Effective immediately, Brad Coleman. You are suspended pending investigation. Tyler, your access to the post is revoked. Security and compliance will follow up within the hour." The finality of his words left no room for response. Brad's face drained of color. Tyler looked like he wanted to argue, but no words came. Chase stepped back, avoiding everyone's eyes. Jackson turned then not to Brad, not to Tyler, but to Cassie. His voice softened, carrying across the diner. Cassie, thank you for keeping the record. People like you are the reason this company still stands. Starting today, you won't just be a server, you'll be training others, because integrity deserves a voice. For the first time, Cassie's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, unable to speak, but her trembling hands told the whole story. The diner stayed silent, not from fear this time, but from the weight of truth laid bare. Jackson gathered the folder, slipped it under his arm, and stepped away from the counter. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't made a scene. He had simply revealed what had always been there. And in that silence, justice spoke louder than anything else. The weight in the diner didn't lift right away. Even after Jackson spoke, the air held still, as if everyone inside was waiting for something else to happen. Brad's lips moved, but no sound came. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the door as though escape could erase what had just been exposed. Jackson didn't linger at the counter. He turned, scanning the room. His eyes didn't accuse the customers, but they didn't spare them either. Every witness in the diner had just seen the truth revealed not on a spreadsheet, not in a quarterly report, but in plain daylight, over black coffee and cold toast. Cassie stood rooted near table 6, her apron still tied tight, notebook hidden deep in its pocket. For weeks, that notebook had been her only defense. Now, with Jackson's words, it was transformed into evidence, into vindication. She blinked quickly, steadying herself, then exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Jackson's voice softened, carrying clearly but without force. A restaurant can survive small losses. It can even bounce back from bad reviews. But it cannot survive when the people who hold it up stop believing they're seen. That is where failure begins, not in profit margins. Here. He tapped the counter gently, the papers still beneath his hand. Brad tried once more, desperate. Sir, please. I've been managing this location for years. The numbers are strong. We hit revenue targets 3 quarters straight. Surely there's another way to resolve this. Jackson cut him off, not with anger, but with clarity. Numbers mean nothing if they're built on silence. Targets mean nothing if people like Cassie lose faith in the system. You didn't build this diner. You didn't carry trays when it was short-staffed. You didn't write in that notebook. She did. And you erased her from the system so your nephew could take what wasn't his. Cassie's breath caught. For the first time, the room wasn't ignoring her. Everyone was listening. Tyler spoke up weakly, his voice cracking. It wasn't like that. Uncle Brad said it was fine. I didn't know it was wrong. Jackson's gaze fixed on him, steady. If you have to hide it, it's wrong. If someone else does the work and you take the reward, it's wrong. You knew enough. Tyler looked down, cheeks flushed red. Chase shifted further back, as though distance might protect him. Jackson straightened, slipping the folder back under his arm. His final words were measured, meant for everyone, not just Brad. This isn't about one branch. It's about what we allow. If we allow silence, if we allow manipulation, then the company dies from the inside out. Not all at once, piece by piece. Today that stops. He turned toward Cassie again, voice softening. You won't be invisible here anymore. You'll train new staff. You'll make sure no one else ends up on that supplemental list. Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears came with a small smile. Thank you, she whispered. Jackson gave a single nod, then moved toward the door. The bell above jingled as he stepped out into the crisp air. The lot was quiet, the drizzle gone. He paused for a moment under the neon glow, drawing a slow breath. Behind him, the diner was no longer just a place of coffee and toast. It was a lesson, a reminder that leadership isn't measured in profit alone, but in the dignity of the people who make it possible. Some truths never show up in reports. They don't flash on dashboards. They wait in silence, in the margin of a notebook, in the hesitation of a worker's smile, until someone chooses to see them. And that morning, Jackson Reeves had chosen to see. Jackson didn't drive away immediately. He sat behind the wheel of his truck, the same position as days earlier when he had first walked into Sunrise Diner 28 under a different name. But this time, he wasn't hiding. The silence inside the cab was heavy, but not with uncertainty. It was the weight of confirmation. Everything Cassie had written in her notebook, everything the audit had revealed, every quiet suspicion, it had all come into focus. His phone buzzed once. Mara's name lit the screen. He answered without hesitation. It's done, he said simply. Her voice on the other end was calm, efficient. We already pulled access credentials. Brad's accounts are locked, Tyler's as well. The ghost employee file has been flagged and removed. Finance is preparing the compliance report. Do you want a press release? Jackson looked out the windshield, eyes narrowing on the diner's flickering neon sign. He shook his head, though she couldn't see it. This isn't about a headline. It's about trust. Handle it internally. Make sure every branch knows the system has been reset. Every roll, every split, every tip accounted for. Quietly, thoroughly. Understood. He hung up. For a long moment he stayed still, hands resting loosely on the wheel. Leadership, he thought, wasn't about being seen in boardrooms or celebrated in press. It was about moments like this, standing in a small-town diner, confronting silence, giving voice to the ones who had been erased. Inside, Cassie continued her shift. The diner moved on as if nothing monumental had just occurred. Plates clattered, coffee poured, forks scraped across porcelain. But the air wasn't the same. Tyler was gone from the counter. Chase kept his distance, eyes low, and Cassie moved differently. Still precise, still steady, but lighter somehow, like a burden had been lifted. Later that afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds and lit the chrome trim on the diner's windows, she slipped the notebook back into her apron, not hidden anymore, but carried openly. For weeks it had been her shield, her silent protest. Now it was something else. Proof that being invisible didn't mean being powerless. Jackson thought of all the other branches, all the other Cassies who might be out there, serving coffee, running shifts, doing the work while someone else manipulated the system. He knew this wasn't just about one manager, one nephew, one diner. It was about culture, about what people believed they could get away with when they thought no one was watching. That night, in the corporate office, the investigation files were finalized. The numbers were cold but undeniable. $4,826 in diverted tips, 67% routed through Tyler C., a ghost payroll account with over 20 logged shifts, a shell company created solely to disguise stolen wages. But behind the numbers were faces. Cassie's quiet persistence. The trainee she had guided through an order without hesitation. The silence of staff who had looked away. The customers who had sat only feet from theft and never noticed. Jackson drafted a single line to his leadership team. Integrity is not optional. If the system doesn't protect the people who hold us up, then we've already failed. Start over. Get it right this time. He didn't sign it with his title. He didn't need to. As midnight approached, Jackson closed his office blinds and sat back. The storm that had begun in his chest that first morning with coffee and toast had broken fully now. The system had been exposed. The people who thought they were untouchable had been stripped of power. And yet, it wasn't anger that lingered with him. It was something quieter. The memory of Cassie sliding that notebook across the table, her voice steady but fragile. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy. He realized then what mattered most. Numbers could be fixed, processes could be rebuilt, but trust, once broken, was far harder to repair. His job wasn't just to fire Brad or revoke Tyler's access. It was to restore that trust, branch by branch, shift by shift, until no one felt invisible again. The next morning, as the city woke and light crept across the horizon, Jackson Reeves prepared to visit another branch. Not with disguise this time, not as an observer, but as a leader willing to walk through the door and ask the question too few had asked lately, is the system still fair? Because fairness, he knew now more than ever, wasn't a feature of the business. It was the foundation. And without it, everything else collapsed. 2 days later, Jackson Reeves walked into the same diner once more. The drizzle had cleared, the neon sign still hummed faintly, and the morning light poured through the front windows, washing the chrome trim in gold. To anyone watching, he looked the same as before, tall, steady, plain jacket over pressed shirt, but the atmosphere was different now. Inside, the rhythm had changed. Tyler was gone. Chase worked quietly, no longer hovering by the register. The counter that once felt like a gatekeeper's throne now stood neutral, just a place for receipts and coffee pots. And Cassie, she was different too. The fatigue still lined her face, but there was something new in her step. Lighter, grounded, seen. She was refilling a customer's mug when she noticed him at the door. For a moment her lips parted, unsure whether to smile, unsure if this was a visit or a test. Jackson nodded once, reassuring her. He slid into the same booth where he had first ordered coffee and toast, as if to remind himself where the truth had started. Cassie approached with a pot of coffee. Black, right? Jackson's mouth lifted slightly. You remembered. She poured quietly, setting the mug in front of him. But this time, there was no hesitation when she spoke. Things already feel different. The tips went through last night. Every cent. Split evenly. Jackson's eyes rested on her, calm but steady. Good. That's how it should always have been. For a moment, she looked down at the coffee pot in her hand, then back at him. I didn't think anyone would care. I thought, maybe it was just the way it worked. Jackson leaned forward slightly, his voice low but clear. The system doesn't define what's right. People do. And when the system forgets that, it's our job to fix it. Cassie swallowed hard, her throat tight. For weeks she had felt erased, her words ignored, her labor invisible. Now, standing at the booth with the company's founder, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: dignity. Jackson pulled a slim folder from his jacket, sliding it across the table. This is for you. It's a training program draft. You'll be teaching new hires how to use the POS, how tips are distributed, and how to keep records. No one should ever feel like their work vanishes into thin air. Her hand hovered above the folder, uncertain, then settled on it. She nodded slowly. I'll do my best. You already have, Jackson said simply. The diner buzzed around them, forks clinking, conversations rising and falling, the hum of the coffee machine. Life continued. But something beneath the surface had shifted permanently. Customers didn't know the details. Staff didn't speak of it openly. But the silence that once covered theft had been replaced by something stronger, a quiet certainty that someone was watching, that fairness mattered again. Jackson finished his coffee, left a tip in cash on the table, and stood. Cassie met his eyes as he headed for the door. Thank you, she said softly. He paused just long enough to answer. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You wrote it down when no one else would. That's what saved this place. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped into the bright morning. The lot was half full, cars glinting under the sunday. For Jackson, the mission wasn't over. There would be other branches, other silent notebooks, other wrongs waiting in plain sight. But this diner had taught him something simple and permanent. Leadership wasn't proven in boardrooms or headlines. It was proven in moments like this, in the trust of a waitress who finally felt seen, in the courage of a notebook that told the truth, and in the quiet resolve to make sure silence never won again. The following week, word spread quietly through the Sunrise chain. No memo, no press release, just the kind of whispers that travel faster than official announcements. Staff at other branches heard that the system had been reset, that every tip was now visible and split fairly, that someone high up had walked into a diner unannounced and caught a manager siphoning money. At Diner 28, the difference showed in small ways. Cassie no longer kept her notebook hidden in her apron. It sat openly on the counter beside the register, not as protest anymore, but as a guide. New trainees flipped through its pages like a manual, learning not just how to take orders, but how to recognize when something didn't feel right. For the first time in months, she didn't walk home with the weight of silence pressing on her shoulders. Jackson returned briefly, standing near the doorway instead of slipping into a booth. He didn't need to stay long. He watched Cassie train a new hire, watched customers leave tips that actually reached the people serving them, watched the flow of work feel balanced again. He gave a single nod to himself before stepping back into the sunlight. Justice hadn't come with headlines or applause. It had come in the simple, steady rhythm of coffee poured, bills settled, and tips shared as they were meant to be. For Jackson, that was enough. That night, long after the diner lights dimmed and the last customers had gone home, Jackson Reeves sat alone in his office. The city stretched out beyond the glass, but his mind lingered on that chipped ceramic cup, that plate of toast, and the quiet voice that had said what no report ever showed. The ones who do the work don't get the tips. He thought of Cassie's notebook, the pages filled with careful numbers and quiet courage. One server with a pen had revealed more truth than entire departments with spreadsheets. It was a reminder he would carry into every branch, every board meeting, every decision ahead. Leadership wasn't about being the loudest in the room. It wasn't about titles or power printed on business cards. It was about choosing to see what others ignored, to stand up where silence had settled in, and to make fairness the rule instead of the exception. As midnight approached, Jackson closed his laptop and turned off the office lights. Tomorrow, there would be another diner, another team, another test of the system. But tonight, He let the thought settle. Justice didn't need to be loud. Sometimes it was as simple as a waitress finally smiling at the end of her shift, knowing the tips in her pocket were truly hers. And for Jackson Reeves, that was the kind of victory worth building a company on.